Welcome to the mobile automation tutorial by qtpselenium.com. Right now, I'll just give you an overview of what mobile automation is and what are the various tools available and what are the differences between the tools, which all tools you can use. Because many times people have come over to me and asked questions like, fine, I have a mobile application which it needs to be tested on iOS as well as Android. What should I do, and which could be the best tool which I can use? Right, so I'll take up various tools over here. Rather, I have listed down the tools, right? Appium, Android, iOS driver and Calabash. These are 4 tools which are right now famous in the market. Fine. You might be wondering, why haven't I talked about the tool Robotium? Okay, so I'll answer your questions gradually. Fine. First of all, one of the best tools which I like is Calabash. It is actually Ruby based, right? You can include BDD, and you can use Cucumber frameworks and the features files and all to build your scripts. Fine. And talking about Robotium, well, Robotium people used to use, okay, but the problem is Robotium is primarily Android based and it requires the source code of the mobile application which you are testing, right? Whatever mobile application which you are testing, it requires the source code of that particular mobile application, right? So it's not a like, as if you compare it with the tools like Appium or something, then Appium is pretty much easier and has got a variety of features. Like Appium can test iOS as well as Android, right? You don't need the APK file. APK file is the executable file of the application which you want to test. Every application on mobile, for example an application like WhatsApp, right, every application on mobile has a particular APK file, right? You don't need that particular APK file if you want to test your application using Appium, right? Appium as a tool is available in multiple languages, right? Multiple languages like Java, Ruby, C#, Perl, PHP, not Perl, PHP and JavaScript, right? So Python is also there, okay, right? So these are the various advantages of this tool Appium. Okay, now many times people, they try to compare Appium with Android, that which tool which should I use, right? The question is not whether you should use Appium or whether you should use Android. Okay, the question is that, can I use Appium or can I use Android? Okay, you'll come to know what I mean over here, right? If I talk about a tool like Android, then Android is primarily made for Android. Okay, it needs the APK file of the application which you are testing. Fine. And you know, working with Android is not as easy as working with Appium, right? You have to start up the command prompt and start up the Android server, run the application. Sometimes what happens is that after you run the application, you want to rerun the application, you face a lot of issues. Fine. So it's not as smooth tool as Appium is, and it is also available in multiple languages. Fine. Alright. Now what do I mean by saying that Android is not a very smooth tool as compared to Appium, and why still people use Android, right? Look, the thing is, in market the Android phones are present, right? Let's talk about Android right now. Okay, let's talk about Android, then I'll talk about iOS. In market, Android phones are there. Okay, Android has got versions. Initially Android 2 was there, 2.x, then 3.x, now 4.x is there in the market. Fine. Whenever you buy a Android phone, you always know that what is the version of Android on your phone. Initially when the phones came up, they had 1, 2, 3, 4. So gradually the versions, they changed. Okay, now as a buyer, you know that what are the versions of Android in the market. Fine. But for the developers of Android, the people who develop the Android applications, fine, they also have got a concept of API levels. For example, API level 11, 12. There are various API levels in Android. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So right now I think 21 is the latest one. Okay, I'll have to re-verify it. Fine. Now there are various API levels as well. Right. Each version of Android supports certain API level. For example, say 4.x, 3.x is supporting the API level 14. That is, it is supporting till API level 14. Fine. 4.x will be supporting till 21. 2.x will be supporting till 11. Right. Now what happens is that if you want to use Appium, fine. If you don't know what API level is, just be with me. You will come to know in the next tutorial in which I ask you to install Appium. Right, that will be much more clear over there. Right, but please understand the fact that there are some API levels in Android, and every phone supports API levels. Right. So, for example, 3.x. I'm just taking a generic example. I don't mean over here that 3.x will support 14. Okay, just taking a general example. Right. So now what happens is that if you are testing with Appium, then you can only test above 17 API levels. 17 is the benchmark. Okay, if you are testing with Android, you can test the older you can test your application on older phones as well, which support the older API levels. So that's why I answered the question that it's not that whether I should use Appium in my project or whether I should use Android. The question is that can I use Appium or can I use Android in my project, because it depends on your project. Is your app which you are testing supposed to work on all the versions of Android? Fine. The latest versions 4. something, they work on Appium, but the older versions, they might not work on Appium. So you might have to use Android over there. Okay, right? So this is the situation right now. Fine. And as far as iOS is concerned, complete iOS driver is there inside Appium and it is supported. When you use Android, okay, the Android guys tell that fine, if you are working with Android, we only give support for Android. For iOS, you will have to use the iOS driver, which is again a different tool. Fine. So you have to combine both of them. Right. And all these tools, Appium, Android and all, they support scalability. What do you mean by scalability? That is, you can use Selenium grid with them. Okay, you can have parallel test cases running. Right, you can make a node and run the test cases parallelly, maybe on different versions of phones, and you can test your applications. Right, I want to explain the concept in the simplest possible words to you. I really don't want to confuse you guys right now. Okay, if you look at the Appium website, then over here they have clearly mentioned that iOS is supported and Android 4.2 is there, and for 2.3 it is actually referring to Android, right? So basically the older versions, they are going back to Android, the older versions of the phone. Right, now how do these tools work? That is the major question, because in Google, if you read that, they'll say that they work on the Selenium JSON wire protocol. Yes, they do work on Selenium JSON wire protocol, both Appium and Android. Okay, and if you talk about iOS driver, fine. So if you just go to Google and search iOS driver, and you'll get the website for that. This is the one. Right, and automate any iOS native, hybrid or mobile app. I'll talk about what native, hybrid, mobile. Basically you can automate any app with this, any iOS app using the Selenium WebDriver API. Look, it's implemented using the JSON wire protocol. Look, I'll tell you what this JSON wire protocol is. Fine. Look, the thing is, I'll explain it to you with a diagram. Fine. Suppose I'll make 3 blocks. Fine. And in these 3 blocks, this is your application, mobile application. It is in the mobile. Right. In between you have these tools, Appium or Android or iOS driver. Okay, and this is Selenium WebDriver. They are built, these tools are built, you can say these tools are built on the top of Selenium WebDriver, but there are a lot of things which you need to learn. Okay, the first thing is that WebDriver communicates with these tools through something known as JSON wire protocol. Right, whatever commands you fire with Selenium WebDriver, okay, they are communicated to Appium or Android or iOS through JSON wire protocol. Okay, now in turn these tools, these servers, okay, rather Appium server or Android server or iOS server, it communicates with the mobile apps based on whatever commands you are firing with WebDriver. Okay, now how do they communicate with the mobile? That is again a question. For example, I'll talk about Appium. Appium uses UI Automator. UI Automator is something which is there for in case of Android. Okay, in case of Android, Appium uses UI Automator. Fine. UI Automator is something which is a part of Android. Okay, Android developers use it. It's when you download Android, UI Automator comes into your machine. Fine. It is the engine with which you can communicate with your mobile application. So basically, in layman's term, you fire a command with WebDriver into Appium. Appium will convert that command into Android command and fire it on mobile. Okay, so I'm talking in terms of layman. Okay, if you don't know anything, so WebDriver command comes over here, and Appium converts the WebDriver command into Android command or iOS command, whatever you want to say, and it sends the command into the mobile application. Right? How these commands are converted, what does Appium use? Right? We will talk about everything. Fine. It uses the UI Automator for Android, and for iOS it actually uses, hold on, if you go to this link again, out here they have clearly mentioned that for Android it uses UI Automator, for iOS it uses UI Automation. Its UI Automation is the framework provided by Apple. Okay, Apple says that fine, if you want to automate Apple apps, you use UI Automation framework given by us. So what Calabash guys did, they used this framework rather to fire commands on to fire WebDriver commands on this framework, right? And similarly, UI Automator framework is provided by Google, and Google says that if you want to automate Android applications, use this framework given by us. So these Appium guys took up these frameworks and made a simple tool known as Appium, which could fire iOS as well as Android commands. For older versions, they ask you to use Android. Fine. If you are confused, if you are not able to understand, or if you are able to understand 50%, it's okay. This is just the first module. Once you cover the course, you will come to know what I am talking about. Okay, it's very tough for me also to explain you directly what it is. Right. Now, which tool should I use? That's the question. Okay, which tool should I use? This is the question which people ask me. Well, if you are new, start with Appium. If you want to learn, start with Appium. If you want to implement your project, start with Appium. Right? If you want to do it with Java. And look, the thing is, if you do it with Calabash, you are stuck with Groovy language. But if you do with Appium, you can select any particular language, because WebDriver supports multiple languages. Fine? Alright. So in the next part of the tutorial, I'll teach you how to install Appium, download, install and configure Appium on your PC, which is a little complex thing, right? It is not a simple thing. Look, configuring these tools is a big task. Fine. You can visit the website. Okay, this was module number 1. Now I'll talk about module number 2, download and configure Appium Maven dependencies. Alright, fine.